I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today. It feels like, for me, this has been a long time coming to stand in front of this particular assembly. I don't want to begin, though, first without saying a word about our hosts. When we initially made plans to be here in Dallas, we had no expectation that we would be coming here on the heels of an extraordinary natural disaster that struck not so many weeks ago, providing the impetus for great damage and destruction at the JCC and its surrounding neighborhood. And to our friend and colleague Artie Allen, who has, together with his team, gotten the community center back on its feet, I extend a big thank you from all of us for allowing us to be with you here. I also want to say that this address, this opportunity for me to engage with you is a long time coming, and I've had a bumpy history with this particular conference. Those of you who were in Las Vegas 2 years ago know that I committed the cardinal sin of planning to say too many things, and I ran long, and my appearance was cut short before I quite got to the end of what I had hoped to share. For very unfortunate personal reasons, last year the presentation never got started. We have, I think, at the association been aspiring to be of greater service to you and to the field in a significant way since the first day, certainly, that I got there, and I'm sure for my colleagues who are more veteran than I, for quite some time before. The chance to spend time together here is a unique opportunity for engagement and dialogue. And so as I stand before you literally with butterflies in my stomach, and I certainly do my fair share of public speaking, it's anticipation of the fact that there probably isn't a more important audience for engagement of the matters that are so significant for our community and for our field than this one. And so I hope to be able to do justice to the opportunity it's taken me so long to reach. I also want to extend thanks to the folks that pinch hit for me last year, that both Brian and Jen, who I believe were still counting their tenures in weeks at the time last year, stood in and did so admirably, and I'm grateful to them for that opportunity as well. We're also missing a few of our colleagues here today. I want to send out Refuah Shlema, good wishes to Betsy Lynch from San Diego, who's preparing for back surgery before the end of this month, to Rick Nelson from Richmond, Virginia, who is just on the other side of hip replacement surgery, and though he would not have been in this room anyway, our longtime friend Lenny Silberman, who's having a bariatric surgery, I believe on Tuesday of this week, is in our thoughts as well. So we're sorry to be missing them. At the same time, we are thrilled, obviously, to have everybody here, but I would be remiss in not identifying several people who are here either for the first or second time of late by dint of the fact that their JCCs have renewed their connection with JCC Association. I want to make sure I get everybody here, but Danielle Ellman from Common Point and Marcy Glazer from San Francisco, Josh Weinstein from Rochester, Aaron Rosenfeld from the Five Towns on Long Island, and Steve Wendell from Virginia Peninsula. We are thrilled to have you back and honored to count you among the assembled executive leadership here. Several more of our new colleagues who had renewed their affiliation are not here today, so we're missing the presence of the leadership of London, Ontario, and the Safra Center in New York, but we'll look forward to having them with us next time. And the work of re-engaging formerly affiliated JCCs is continuing. My hope is that next year we will have the executives from Albuquerque and Allentown, Borough Park, the Edlovich JCC in Washington, D.C., Montreal, the Sid Jacobson JCC, Staten Island, and hopefully others that have not yet gotten into the active stage of their conversation with us. But there isn't a not yet affiliated JCC out there with whom we are not working earnestly to try either to advance or initiate a conversation about making sure that they are here, because like each of you who are here, it's not just having you in the room, it's the unique contributions that you and your communities make to our understanding of the entire landscape of North American Jewish life. We continue to be diminished by any who aren't in the room and strengthened by everybody who becomes a participating member. So we look forward to far more of that. I want to take a minute to set the table for what I'd like to do with the limited time that I have here with you this afternoon, and talk about the nature of the conversation that Mark Young beautifully set the table and established the context for our time together. This is not a show or program that Sue and the team have organized and put on for your entertainment or in hopes of satisfying your sense of having received something worthwhile. This is a once-in-a-year conversation between the most significant professional leaders in this field, and must be, to be as effective as we desire for it to be, a conversation and a dialogue, a debate and a discussion, an opportunity for us to get the best from one another as we seek to take the work back to wherever it is that we practice it from here in Dallas. That's the opportunity that we have, and is what is presented to us by this conference, and it's of vital importance because of the significance and the gravitas that each of you have as important leaders in the community. I'm going to use this session to update you on our work at JCC Association and our continued efforts to assure that we are doing the utmost to support and enable your JCCs to be the best possible versions of themselves, to serve as your voice to the wider Jewish world and increasingly to major and mega Jewish philanthropy, and to become an engine that drives more and more resources out into the field from sources that we have identified. I want to reflect for a minute before I begin on this update on what it means to be a leader in the Jewish community, and how much time and energy is spent by those who claim to be in leadership roles trying to figure out how to give the market what we believe the market is most eager to receive. And I'm sure we're all engaged in that and responding to customer service issues and to the desires of parents and families, to donors and funders, and to those that stimulate us in conversation in the community all the time. But there is a difference between being customer service oriented and aspiring to fulfill a need that the community claims that it has, and being a leader or being a shepherd. Because our goal shouldn't be to become the perfect reflection of what the community believes that it wants. Our goal should be to help a community find things that it never imagined it could find, to establish for ourselves vision and opportunity that enables them to become more than what they think they want, and more than what they think they can expect to be. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us not only to see and engage what the wishes are out there, but to help see if we can expose people to things that they hadn't previously imagined were possible. For us, for me at JCC Association, I come to this conference at the beginning of my third full year. In this role, I can reflect back and tell you that year one was a year of immersive learning of the association, about the field, about the way we are viewed and seen in the wider world. Year two began with the pursuit of a new design, a renewal of JCC Association in a model that could be far more supportive and contributory to your remarkable work and efforts around the continent. It meant a reorganization. It meant taking the best of the talent and ability that we had already on board and complementing it with the best possible talent we could find out in the field. We come to the end, or having been to the end of the second year, feeling pretty good that the team is largely in place and that we're in a position to get out of the gate with increasing traction, which you will see, I think, feel and experience even over the course of the next couple of days. What we have arrived at in our 103rd year is a significantly energized startup moment for JCC Association, where we are not defined by rigid architecture and hierarchical structure, but by the accumulation of talent, first-tier, top-shelf talent across all the major functional areas in which we operate, and surrounded by coordinating leadership who bear titles with chief in them, a chief experience officer, a chief program officer, a chief development officer, and in time, a chief talent officer, to whom all of the people who are working in those middle functions will be accountable. We will be constantly forming, dissolving, and reforming coalitions of professionals and departments devoted and determined to enable the senior-most people to guide us in the direction of things that they are uniquely positioned and qualified to provide us in. But each will not have their own subset of the tree. We're not that big, and we have no aspirations to be that big. We have to be that good. We have to be able to say that in people like Mark Horowitz and David Ackerman and Leah Garber and the others whose names would naturally come to your attention if you know these areas of our work, they are so profoundly talented that they will be able to move back and forth between the areas that we are looking to pursue as parts of an integrated, accountable, and mutually supportive collection of first-tier talent. And that is the image and the direction that we are going in. I can tell you that, broadly speaking, our profile is up. We are aggressively pursuing new sources of revenue. I can tell you that in Jennifer Mamlet's first full year, we saw outside major gift philanthropy go up from $3.25 to $4 million, and we are barely out of the gate. And those of you who are involved in fundraising, and I don't think there's a person in this room that isn't know that major philanthropy is not an instant gratification business. This kind of progress on the back of basically immediate work out in the field is indicative of a remarkable amount of opportunity that lies ahead. In addition to what we're doing in major gifts, we have a new plan that we are rolling out on corporate philanthropy, evolving what has been traditionally our preferred vendor program, which was an underperforming and underserving resource, to a program of corporate partnerships. We've started with our flagship, the great people at Coca-Cola, who this year will provide more support than in any single year in the history of their 30-year relationship with us. And we are embarking on work with several other name brand corporations with the intention that we not only bring significant sponsorship dollars continentally and to the big public events, but that we drive sponsorship into the local communities and create a culture in which we will be able to assist you in bringing sponsorship, corporate dollars to bear in support of local efforts and the local JCC programs and activities. You were introduced last year to a longtime colleague of mine, Neil Meyerberg, who is the guy that created the planned giving department at UJA Federation of New York, the guy who teaches the course at the Columbia Graduate School for Not-for-Profit Management. Neil is the first major consultative resource that we have hired and retained to be at your service. He is open for invitations to come to your community, do a consultation about the creation and evolution of a planned giving program for you, and knowing how much or how limited the opportunities are for us to support full-time fundraising departments at all in a JCC. Almost nobody has anybody with a planned giving portfolio on their staff, so that's the first portfolio that we provide for you as a service to the field. We are looking forward to filling up his dance card, though he has begun to make the rounds, and I'm sure you're going to be seeing him more frequently, both continentally and on a local level. We are also in the final stages of launching a national charitable gift annuity program. I want to just say one word about it for those who don't have familiarity with the concept. In a charitable gift annuity, a donor parks an amount of money with a charity in exchange for a promise of an annual payment based on a rate of return. And at the end of that person's life, what remains of the initial amount of money defaults to the charity. In a time of low interest rates, it's incredibly attractive that people who are of retirement age, which is to whom this kind of a program is targeted, can return 6, 7, 8, 9% a year for the rest of their lifetime. The money is managed centrally, and the residuals are returned to the charitable institution that secured the contribution in the first place. Our goal and intention is to create a platform on which you are free to go out and find potential interested parties to buy a charitable gift annuity. We'll administer and manage it, and when the right time comes, we will return to you the resources that remain from the project. There are communities that do this and do this well. The money is, you don't know when you're going to get it, and you don't know how much exactly it's going to be, but it's windfall, unrestricted money when the time comes, and if we can do a big job as a field, we have the ability to create a pipeline of income that was never before available to many, at least, of the JCCs and JCC communities, and we look forward to having you see that in great detail in the next few weeks, I imagine. Those of you who have heard me since the launch of the Beyond 2018, our building blocks operating model, we have been working hard to advance progress on each of the 5 building blocks, and I want to give you a very high level and quick update. Building block number 1, the talent building block, predicated on this idea that we are the largest collective employer on the Jewish communal landscape, more than 6,000 full-time skilled professionals, more than 32,000 part-time and seasonal. We're the big game, and yet we are perpetually suffering from an inadequate supply of capable talent at each level and to advance to the levels that we need them to move. We have been working for the last year under the extraordinary guidance, direction, and frankly, elbow grease of Brian Schreiber in his service as special advisor to JCC Association on the draft white paper that I hope all of you have had time to read and read at length. He has been seeking input from within and beyond the field from some of the great experts in the private and not-for-profit sector with regard to talent and talent development. Having sought the wisdom of folks like Gali Cooks at Leading Edge, of David Edel, the founder of DRG, one of the most significant recruitment firms in our field, of Mimi Kravitz, the chief talent officer at Hillel, which was a byproduct of a strategic evolutionary effort on their part as well. You can see from the quotes that the kind of feedback that we're getting from people like Gali Cooks or like Rick Nelson from Richmond has been remarkably reinforcing that this could be the major step that we need to make actually a quantum leap forward for us as a field, but it's not ready to be run out of the gate just yet, and that's why tomorrow we're going to have a chance with Brian to get an introduction to where we're at and to workshop the things that you've been reading about so that the input of the people in this room becomes a significant factor in our continued evolution of this document and of this plan. We're referring to it as a white paper today, but if everything goes according to design, sometime in the next 2 months or so, it's going to go from white to blue, from white paper to blueprint, and we are already turning the soil in the world of the mega foundations as potential partners to make huge investment in bringing the blueprint to life. That's the sequence. Careful and thoughtful planning, stakeholder engagement and involvement in the evolution of the process, affirmation by the board of JCC Association that this is a major commitment of us to the field, and then marketing it to some of the big players out there, brand names who you know about, for whom this is going potentially to be of interest so that we can bring, I believe, tens of millions of dollars to bear in radically altering the landscape with regard to the talent pipeline for our field, with the knowledge that if we radically alter the pipeline for the JCC field as large as it is, it will revolutionize the talent pipeline for the wider Jewish community as well, because there's an awful lot of permeability and therefore a huge opportunity for us. The innovation building block, I just want to rattle off a few things. I will remind you that the notion wasn't that we would innovate and bestow the wisdom of the Continental Organization on you by dint of our largesse. The idea is that you are innovating all the time in and around your markets, and our challenge is to curate those innovations and identify those things that will be of interest to philanthropic investors so that we can scale the best ideas and take them out to the wider part of the field. Last year, we unveiled our first innovative strategy to begin this process with the Innovation Incubator. You'll recall that we had 3 leading charitable foundations from across the continent here, the Covenant Foundation, the Jacobs Family Foundation, the Maimonides Fund. We presented 6 projects. You presented 6 projects. Several of them immediately captured the attention of our judges. Jay on Wheels, which was the first prize winner, Artie from Dallas, has already produced 4 more Jays on Wheels or variations on the theme across the field, funded by Maimonides. 5 more are in the pipeline. Zionism 3.0, which is Zach Bodner and the Oshman family JCC's major conference on 21st century Zionism, also captured the attention of Maimonides. A think tank was held this year after the 5th annual conference in Palo Alto with 12 participating JCC executives. And as a result of that, a multi-million-dollar proposal for bringing Z3 to 25 JCCs over the next 3 years is now sitting in front of that major foundation that has expressed interest, and we look forward, I hope, to rolling out very good news. Leonard Petlach and several others got us into a conversation about storefront JCC programs, having discovered that any number of you are working on bringing initiatives to neighborhoods and locations in your geographies that are not serviced by your physical plant, the major JCC, and as a result of that, we have raised and elevated consciousness across any number of current and prospective communities for advancing that work. This year's Innovation Incubator will have us bring the top leaders from the Mandel Foundation, the Marcus Foundation out of Atlanta, the Schultz Foundation here in Dallas, 3 more, not just important thought leaders, but remarkably powerful and influential players on the Jewish organizational landscape, the funding landscape. And they are here not just to watch and judge and bestow their wisdom, which is medium for the effort. They're here to see you. They are here to be exposed to what you're doing and who you are. This year we have the good fortune of having the judges with us basically for the entire day. We will engage them separately. We will engage them by size of JCC. We will engage them in the Innovation Incubator. We're here so that you can show them why we are worthy for far greater levels of support than we've had in the past, and we want us to get to know them in ways that will help us be far more sophisticated in how we pursue those resources from them. We launched another concept in the fall this year, what we're terming a program accelerator. The idea is if we can find funders who are interested in subject areas and get them to provide pools of funding that they would make available in kind of venture philanthropy investment, and we could invite JCCs to apply for those grants on a matching basis to do things that, but for the absence of resources, they would not be able to do on their own. We would be able to deliver resources directly to the field and at the same time continue the curation of ideas worthy of scaling. So we kicked this thing off this year around Israel engagement with a first round of grants that were announced at the end of the board's meeting in October. But Israel engagement is, again, just the first way we might go about it. We are already talking about using the model lather, rinse, repeat for things like inclusion, for day camp programs, for staff development, for community service. You name it. If it's an area in which we, the field, are interested, there are funders out there that would be interested in dabbling, in seeing the JCC field as a laboratory for trying different things in different places. The unfolding pilot around Israel engagement has a 5-year vision. We expect to distribute $1.25 million over the course of 5 years through at least 2 grant cycles every single year as we continue to test, lather, rinse, repeat, learn, evolve, refine, and we are already working on several other prospective funders for other group initiatives like this one, the ones that we'll think of and the ones that you'll think of. That's our second, I think, significant area around innovation that we are moving forward with. And we are very much at the steep end of the curve with regard to our literacy and familiarity with all the opportunities that you're already working on. We've spent time in the last few months digging into J-Cares, your volunteer service program several JCCs doing around the Christmas holiday in their communities. We have been looking at and have been inspired by a series of inclusion programs, one of which you'll hear more about at the incubator tomorrow, the Shemesh Farms program at the Shalom Institute in Southern California, inclusion programs at Tamarack camps around family programs and young adults with severe disabilities. We have been looking at spiritual engagement programming at JCCs in different parts of the movement where there is room in the community to contribute in that way. Brian Schreiber and the Pittsburgh JCC innovating around the high holidays after shul time, opportunities to bring members of the community together. Again, the Oshman JCC and Zach Bodner initiating an all-night Shavuot study program at a local outdoor shopping mall using the educational expertise of Binah, the secular yeshiva out of Israel, and having done so with remarkable success. It's obvious to us that the more we see and the more we experience and the more, frankly, we hear from you, the smarter and better we are at understanding what all the opportunities are that lie in front of us, and become better at matchmaking between those opportunities and the people who can help us to advance those agenda items. To that end, and I was discussing this with Michael Waldman this morning, we have had insufficient opportunity to see what's going on in your agencies, in your institutions, and at your programs. And while for me it has been an extraordinary, eye-opening experience to get out to increasingly dozens and dozens of JCCs, there are some 160 or so JCCs in the field and our Jewish community camps, another 10 and potentially more of those. We need to see what's going on in the field, not just once in a while, but every single year. And so together with several of my colleagues and with a great deal of wisdom and insight from Joanne Harmon, our Chief Marketing Officer, we are in the planning stages of something which we are calling the J-Corps, the upshot of which will be a senior member of the JCC Association leadership will visit every JCC every single year so that we can be out hearing and listening and learning about what's going on in your shop, and you can be as up-to-date as we can make you regarding what's going on in ours. Think of it again as the saloon doors. They've got to swing both ways for us to know how we can best service and support your work, and to figure out how we can bring back knowledge and input and recommendation and critique and guidance to the continuing work that we do on your behalf in our representational role. That work continues. The third of the major building blocks for a quick update is our signature portfolio. All of you, I hope, know and have had some contact already with Sam Cohen, the brilliant senior professional of the JCC Maccabi unit. She has, in little more than a year's time, created a growing pipeline of interested communities in hosting the games. I'll come back to that in a moment. She has launched a pilot learning opportunity for us with the campus games at Pace University this summer so that we can test a different kind of implementation that might allow us to grow and expand those games considerably. And she has, with the help of some of the wonderful people in this room, Scott Ehrlich and Todd Rockoff and several other JCCs, including the Miles Nadal and others that came together to help us envision JCC Maccabi Access, the first continentally driven inclusion set of games that will be piloted this summer at the Lawrence Family JCC in San Diego, and will, by the summer of 2021, become a standard component of every year's JCC Maccabi games. That, by the way, today is what, the 26th of January? It's 15 months and 26 days since Sam Cohen came to New York. It's an awful lot of dynamic progress and development in a very short time, and I think it's important to bear that in mind. At JWB, which is increasingly integrated in the work of the association, we have kickstarted and just completed the first annual birthright program for Jewish cadets at the military academies of the United States, to great feedback and renown. And Rabbi Dr. Tracy Kaplowitz, who came to us from the Solomon Schechter program, a longtime veteran military chaplain, is spearheading the work of making JWB a driver and feeder of families to JCCs across the field. That's her assignment, is engagement with the JCC field. And we are also out working hard to raise money to ease the way through scholarship programs for camps and other experiences that will allow her to get as quick a leg up as possible. J-Response you've heard a little bit about, and you're going to hear more about. Mark Young is one of the great leadership development stars, and I don't have to tell you anything about his educational bona fides after the little bit that you heard from him today. J-Response was an idea that was inspired by the disaster that struck Houston, and Joel Dinkin and his team's extraordinary reaction to overcoming the Hurricane Harvey floods. We took some time to figure out what to do. We found IsraAid as a major partner. You're going to hear from them here in Dallas as well. And when the disaster that struck Pittsburgh in October 27th of 2018 opened the door to our responding, 46 JCCs from across the continent sent staff to Pittsburgh to lend a hand and provide a little relief. Aerobics instructors and membership people, custodial staff and security, executives and senior program officers, they came, they spent time, they lent a hand, they inspired the Pittsburgh community, and were in turn inspired by the opportunity to link elbows and work together in ways that I had never before seen on a continental or national professional landscape. You're going to hear more because it's the way in which we are uniquely contributing to the field. We are not the big moneyed side of the field, and we are not the deep reservoir of educational talent. We got lots of good stuff, but people is our unique gift. 6,000 of us, and 32,000 part-time and seasonal. I want to also give a quick shout out to Michael Rawl and the Youngstown JCC, because it took us a couple of weeks to get the engine running and getting people to get plane tickets and make plans to fly into Pittsburgh. So in the first 2 of the 8-week response to the Tree of Life disaster, it was Michael Rawl and the entire team at the Youngstown JCC that stepped up on behalf of the entire movement. And Michael, we're incredibly proud and grateful to you for that. Mark has just recently announced formally invitations to your input around participation in the first of 3 trainings that will take place this year in partnership with ISRAAID. The first one in Houston coming up in March. Some 20 of us who will be able to stay here in Dallas through part of the day on Wednesday will head over to the Aaron Family JCC and walk the building, letting the people there know that they have been in our thoughts and that we're incredibly grateful for their really remarkable efforts to overcome the recent disaster of the tornado. And we are ready to deploy wherever we're going to be needed together to represent the fact that this entire movement stands behind each of us in, God forbid, an hour of need. The fourth of the building blocks I want to talk to you briefly about is the experience building block, and a reminder that the operating model at the association for a generation or more was all-purpose portfolio consultants on the payroll, assigned each one to a JCC or to a large number of JCCs, as the case may be, to be a primary point of contact. There was no way we could have enough consulting talent to service a wide, diverse, and evolving field, and yet the quality expertise that we need needn't be at 528th Avenue in New York or at our small satellites. The talent is where you are, out in the field. So the revised model of J Experience is that we're going to become the conductors of a symphony orchestra. Gabe Most will be the conductor. His job is to know where the talent is and how to access it, so that if the question comes from Wilmington and the answer is in Windsor, we know who to call in Windsor to make the connection, get out of the way, and enable the assistance and support to be provided, and then to unpack what was learned from it. It's going to take a little bit of time for us to figure it out, but it's not a zero-sum game. We know plenty already regarding initial deployment and initial opportunity, and I expect that, notwithstanding the fact that this is already Gabe's second day or third day, that we're going to begin to see implementation in the early weeks of his tenure as we look to respond to whatever issues, questions, or challenges you may have or your teams may have. And if the answer isn't in the field, then it's our job to go outside the field and get it in a cost-effective way for you. And by the way, as a notion to the future, because every once in a while somebody in the field wants to talk to me about dues, it's very rare. As we begin to draw on your talents and skills in support of the association's work to aid and support the field, we look forward to reaching a point where we get to credit you back that contribution against your dues obligation. It's not that we're just needing cash all the time, but you know that we're trying to overcome what has been a difficult financial situation. But we anticipate getting to a place that if we need you or a member of your staff for X number of hours or Y number of days, that will be counted towards your contribution and support to the association in place of the more traditional ways in which that support has been provided. Finally, the fifth building block, and I list it last if only because I think it's the one that holds perhaps the greatest amount of opportunity and also is the most daunting, and that's the data and information building block. We as a field are not particularly good at data and information management and at databases that talk to one another. And there isn't a person out there who hasn't said, now that's a way the association can help us. And I know, by the way, that we've tried in the past. We'll try something, we'll throw a pile of money at it. If it turns out looking like a plaid zebra, it's not quite what we had in mind. We are going to work in the direction of finding an intelligent investment to make. One such opportunity that we are exploring in earnest right now is springing from remarkable leadership in Detroit, lay and professional, in partnership with leaders in Montreal, an app called J-Life, which is a one-touch platform for signing up and registering for anything the organized Jewish community has to offer. Think of it as the one-table app for the Jewish world. And imagine, therefore, that one table is not just about getting people to restaurants, it's about getting information about people who go to restaurants. And that if we can find a way to help be part of bringing J-Life as a successful platform for the field, because we are the biggest, most programs, most comprehensive, we would be the greatest beneficiary relative to the information that would come out. So our colleague Brian Siegel, Scott Kaufman, the recently passed CEO of the Detroit Federation, who has left the Federation to lead the J-Life development effort, and with the engagement of the extraordinary programming talent that built CrowdRise, working on this platform, our hope is that we'll have more to say about J-Life, and if not J-Life in the end, whatever it is that we need to do, the point is to proceed and proceed intelligently into becoming a major resource for you and for the field. And that is where I want to take us next, which is to become a resource provider. If you haven't heard me say it, some of you have, I want to repeat it here because I think it's important. The association is determined to become a far greater provider, producer of resources for you than we are a consumer of resources from you. And I think that we are working incrementally and not ineffectively at getting there. As we continue our work to curate the opportunities to provide funding to the field, we are also curating the major and mega foundations and what their programmatic and community building interests are so that we can begin to make matches. It's early, but we're out of the gate. And I just want to give you a very quick inventory of what's happened in the last 15 or so months, 18 months depending. In arts and culture, with help from Marvin Pertzik and the Covenant Foundation, we have put $180,000 already into the field, supporting 62 JCCs, providing gatherings and training, creating a consulting faculty that will in time mirror that of the Sheva Center for Early Childhood Education, and beginning the development of signature arts initiatives and re-granting of program grants in that area out to the field. Stay tuned for more at J Summit in Milwaukee in May. I already talked briefly about J on Wheels and bringing programs out beyond the walls. Last year's Innovation Incubator created a $65,000 set of grants and an opportunity to expand that number. The Avichai Foundation, recently having retired or is in the process now of closing its doors, continued to provide new money for chizuk, educational Jewish life and learning professional development capacity for our overnight camps. We have recently announced a major grant from the Crown Family Philanthropies in support of our work with Beit Izzy Shapiro on strengthening inclusion as a cornerstone of family engagement in early childhood education. In this cycle, it will provide $200,000 worth of funding for JCCs that will begin working as operators of the Beit Izzy Shapiro training model that should be rolled out shortly. I talked about the Israel Engagement Program Accelerator. We've already put $100,000 out in the field, and the RFP for round 2, the second round of funding for the first year, is in the field. Announcements to be made in Milwaukee at J Summit. Kivunim may seem like a long-standing program, but it required a renewed commitment to be secured from the Mandel Foundation this past year. Many in the room who were here at the 2019 cycle, and a new group, a wonderful new group, by the way, that began Kivunim over the last few days here in Dallas. The Meron Teen Fellows Program is going to put $150,000 in the field. You see the JCCs, you know who you are. Joy Brand Richardson secured the largest single grant from the Safety Respect Equity Coalition, $150,000 to launch J-Culture, which is a pilot program at which executives and senior lay leaders will be joining us for the inaugural training at the end of this gathering, I think on Wednesday. Joy is here someplace. On Wednesday of this week, to position JCCs as the SRE leaders in their entire communities. not just for the JCC, biggest employer, biggest opportunity, and a chance to lead happening around safety, respect, equity. It sounds, again, like it's not new news, but the big grant that we got at the end of 2018, a 3-year grant from the Jim Joseph Foundation, is putting almost $2 million in the field for the current cycle of Sheva Fellows. It's a remarkable roster of JCCs. Mark Horowitz, who will be here before this conference is over, is giddy at the prospect of the gathering that will take place in February in San Francisco, when the 30 fellows, their 30 supervisors, and their 30 execs will gather together for consultation, deliberation, and evolution of the process that has been undertaken by way of that remarkable grant. UJA Federation of New York gave us $75,000 to do early childhood assessments and consultations with all of the JCCs in the New York area supported by UJA Federation. 21 out of 22 have come through the door, and we have hosted and visited, among others, the 92nd Street Y and the Meyerson JCC of Manhattan in our continued effort to strengthen ties and bring them back into the fold. The 92nd Street Y provided us with a grant on Women in Power, providing senior-level women across professional sectors peer support, mentorship, training, and coaching needed to advance them to the highest levels of leadership. I mentioned the Z3 think tank, which took place on November 11th, immediately after this 5th annual Zionism 3.0 conference, at which a dozen JCCs participated. There is a new community getting into the Zionism 3.0 business on May 17th, when the Steinberg JCC in St. Louis will host a conference for the first time, and with the anticipated philanthropic success that we're going to have, we hope 24 more of you are going to be able to bring Zionism 3.0 to your communities over the next 3 years. We did a little math on the side of the envelope. It's not everything that we dream about, but it's $2.9 million of funding that we have driven out to the field in direct support of roughly 100 JCCs. It's a taste, a tip of the iceberg. I don't know, we thought that was funny. It's lettuce. What can I tell you? I don't know. All right. Mental note, that one didn't play, Joanne. Work on that the next time. And I want to tell you one huge success that we didn't decide to have, and that was the Partners in Jewish Community effort, on which we worked for more than a year to secure contractual commitments from the government of Israel and mega philanthropists in Detroit of $8 million. The contracts were signed. And as we came to the water's edge, we decided, Gary and I, that we were not going to proceed with this project because we got a sense that among our partners were folks who were not going to allow us, the JCC field, to call the shots about how our program was going to operate once it had gotten out of the door. And it was much more important to us to not take the money if it meant not providing you with the promised support for something that we believed you could own and manage in your community, and that we could help to enable to be the success that it was. It's not revenue at any cost. And make no mistake, it was incredibly tempting to get in front of an audience and say, here's the first big one. It's $8 million. We do our part, the funders are happy to have our back. But if we can't deliver resources in a way that's going to work for you and for the field, then we would rather not have the resources at all. I hope that there won't... I hope we won't have to throw too much of it back moving forward. I hope we continue to get smarter about the way that we get it. But I wanted you to be clear that it was a heavy discussion, and we're absolutely certain that it was the right thing to do. So I've alluded many times to our unfolding work with mega philanthropy. Last Tuesday, it's 2 weeks ago, this coming Tuesday, January 14th, was the next step in a remarkable and unfolding process. A conversation that was convened by the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Schusterman Foundation, and the Maimonides Fund, with some 15 of the most long-standing, dedicated, and generous leaders of JCC Association, to talk about, for us, an unprecedented multi-year partnership in philanthropic investment. And we heard from Barry Feinstein, no coincidence, who spent several years sitting in this room as a colleague of ours at the San Francisco JCC, and who understands the strength and power of this platform, that mega philanthropy and a handful of foundations that like doing business together are seeing us as the next great opportunity. The kind of opportunity that they began to see some 20 years ago at Hillel, when Edgar Bronfman and the late Charlie Schusterman and Lynn Schusterman got together to provide first investment in what has become hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in capacity building at Hillel International, and the gateway that Hillel International has become to driving resources and funding out across the field. It's the process that was followed by BBYO. Many of you who are hosting BBYO chapters are partial beneficiaries. Matt Grossman didn't come along and invent it out of the sky, but when Matt came to B'nai B'rith, again with the help of the Schusterman Foundation, and shortly thereafter other brand name foundations, strengthened the capacity of BBYO's continental office in an effort to drive resources out in the field that have made them the biggest thing in teen programs and informal Jewish education at that level. And it's clear, I have to joke, forgive me. I brought my phone up here so that I could have the stopwatch going, because you know I'm prone to talking for too long. So first of all, of course, it goes to sleep. I haven't been able to see the stopwatch, but I am seeing that my son, the soldier, is calling. And though I'm sorely tempted, I've been moving. I don't think he's anywhere dangerous at the moment, unless he's calling to tell me that he is, in which case this will be the last time you see me, I expect. It's been done before for platforms that have smaller footprints and market penetration than ours. There are 6 of these mega foundations that are in the conversation about working together and working together with us. The way it works, the way it's worked in the past, is that their first round of funding is modest by their standards, not so modest by ours, and that the first opportunity is to join hands with existing dedicated philanthropic leadership from within, and that was the challenge that they gave to our leadership on that day. Gary and I and Jen and several others are engaged now on lining up the part that the inside philanthropy would be in a position to play, because whatever we do on the inside is going to be matched 2-to-1 by new philanthropy that we can get on the outside from these foundations. The expectation is 3 years of significant capacity building support that will allow us to pilot a myriad of opportunities that will both strengthen the core and drive resources out into the field. And it was one of those foundations that said, when we get through this first cycle, based on the vision and the opportunity on your platform, we should be talking about 9 figures in the second round. It'll happen if it happens, it'll happen when it happens, and none of it has happened yet. But nobody in the major and mega philanthropic world now is devoid of understanding of the potential that exists on this platform. And that's the work that we continue to do each and every day. That's the drumbeat. And oh, by the way, it's not coincidence that it's become easier to get leaders of mega foundations to come to events like this. It's not coincidence that Lisa Eisen and Barry Feinstein were at Memphis, and 2 years later we're having a different conversation with both of their foundations. It's not coincidence that you'll be seeing more and more of them in Milwaukee when you get to J Summit in those first days of May. None of this is coincidental, and none of it's polite. Everybody's got plenty to do, but we hope that there'll be an opportunity for us to share perhaps news as soon as May. But rest assured that we're not missing a chance to advance those efforts along the way. All of this is part of a wider effort to deliver in thanks to you. Because of the work that you're doing in your institutions and in your communities, you're the legitimacy. All we have been is a megaphone. And it's a very important responsibility. But it doesn't happen, none of it, if you were not doing the work that you do that make you already the most powerful platform for engagement and community building in the geographies in which you serve. And for that, we both are greatly acknowledging and exceedingly grateful. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is partnerships. And I want to say, I have no idea what time it is, Joanne. How are we doing? We're good? A little faster. Damn. I want to say a couple of words of philosophy about partnership, and I've had a chance to reflect on this with a few of you. The architecture of Jewish life today, all of it, organizational and institutional, was built in expectation that levels of participation in Jewish life 10, 20, 30 years ago would not only continue but would go up. And levels of participation have generally gone down. And as a result, the architecture of Jewish life is overbuilt. And the impulse, the reflex, when you are overbuilt and you're trying to hold on to that small piece of yours, is to circle the wagons and pile sandbags so that no more people that you have are going to leave. And it becomes all about your people, my families, my mandate, my donor, my board member. It's all about mine. And you all know who in your communities tells you, don't mess with mine. You deal with yours. You're not spiritual. We do that. You don't do this. Early child in my town. I have yet to meet a single family or donor or board member that was willfully owned by any institution in the Jewish community. The only people that think that they have proprietary interest in any of these people are the institutions that are suffering from the outflow of former participants. Nobody owns anybody. And at the same time, while we think we are in a unique, distinct, and separable business, we are all devoted to the same mission at the end of the day: greater Jewish communities and more vibrant Jewish life. That's the business. And we each have mediums to achieve that end. But if we spend all of our time worrying about competitors instead of partners and allies, then we will, by definition, succeed less as a community. And it's insufficient, I think, for us as Jewish leaders, communal leaders, to be satisfied with our own success. Our own success is a critical foundation of greater success. We don't get greater success without ours, but it's not only about ours. And therefore, if we can find partners locally or continentally or globally willing to join hands to try to do something that will let us all do better, then we should be aggressively on the lookout for the best such opportunities. That was the story behind the announcement at the Union Reform Judaism Biennial several weeks ago in Chicago, at a summit on early childhood education hosted and convened by the Crown Family Philanthropies, who have supported through grants both the URJ's Early Childhood Program and the Sheva Center's Early Childhood Program. We're at a gathering of 110 funders and expert practitioners. We talked through the current bottleneck in doubling the size of Jewish early childhood program participation, which is a horrendous absence of a sufficient supply of teachers. Principally because the pay is lousy, the turnover is rapid, professional development is near impossible. And so even if we have enough room, and I know most of you don't, you have waiting lists, we can't accommodate more families. And if between us we have 60,000 kids and 55,000 families in our programs, and we could have twice that number, then shame on us for not trying to find a way. And there is a way. And we have now jointly with the URJ formed task forces on candidate recruitment and identification, on the development of a certification program, and on a revisiting of the business model of Jewish early childhood education to find out what's the formula for unlocking the bottleneck. And maybe it's money. And so when the Crown Family Philanthropy says it's a gathering like that, maybe this requires $100 million a year. It's not that the money doesn't exist. And he didn't laugh at the end of that comment, by the way. The money's there. We are much more powerful in commanding the attention of philanthropy when we appear in partnership with others in the community. It's not only about us. That matters a lot. You're going to hear more, and you've already begun to hear about partnership with the American Camping Association, looking to make a first major dedicated partnership with the Jewish Community Platform, the Jewish Community Centers movement, through discounts, dedicated and tailored training and support programs. The Jewish Federations of North America has a new CEO, Eric Fingerhut, who for the previous 7 years was part of the renaissance that was going on at Hillel and Hillel International. This year, instead of a General Assembly, they convened FedLab, 1,000 Federation leaders, hundreds of Jewish communal leaders to take counsel with them around their major programmatic areas of focus. Because we are bigger than the people who work at 528th Avenue, we were remarkably effectively represented by Mark Sokol from Boston, by Betsy Lynch from San Diego, and by Michael Feinstein from the Bender JCC, all of whom made invaluable contributions to the discussion and generated accolades for us regarding the significant impression that they made. In the days following FedLab, Eric Fingerhut convened this group of people, a group that never convenes, by JFNA, to talk about an unusual pilot that we are now working through the early stages of, which is identifying communities that are scuffling and coming up with an allied consultative plan for strategic development where all 5 of these organizations bring resources to bear to create a measurable evolutionary plan for communities, not necessarily in crisis, just not necessarily flourishing. Again, stay tuned for details either at a theater or a conference center near you if you happen to be in Milwaukee. Shameless plug, the 3rd through the 5th of May for J-Summit. We're all looking forward to getting there. We are working much more closely with our friends at the Secure Communities Network. This is the organized Jewish community's security expertise, apparatus, and paradigm. For the past few weeks, it's been much closer coordination, but it's several months now of evolving work together. Those of you who have not met Michael Masters, who's the CEO of SCN, you'll be meeting him. He will also be with us at J-Summit in May. Michael is the former Chief of Staff of the Chicago Police Department. He is a graduate of Harvard Law School, and he is a deeply learned and sensitized member of the Jewish community, a Talmud quoter, believe it or not. A remarkable guy. There are 45 full-time security professionals across the organized Jewish community now. It's a lot and not nearly enough, and we are working together with SCN and JFNA in hopes of creating full-time security expertise capacity at the association to serve those communities that are not serviced by local or nearby expertise. And that continues to unfold as well. And I want to say a quick word about JPRO, which is the more than century-old evolved version of the Association for Jewish Community Service. Alana Azen and her small but incredibly talented team have become the gathering place for both a series of services, trainings, mentorship, and more to serve the professional Jewish community. And notably, the largest platform in the professional Jewish community is markedly underrepresented. In the last few months, on top of a handful that were already involved, several that came to the JPRO conference in Detroit over this last summer and were sufficiently impressed have joined the roster. JCC Association has come to an arrangement with JPRO whereby we will pay half the membership cost of any and every JCC and Jewish community camp that chooses to join JPRO. The membership is nominal. The networking is outstanding. In communities that have enough going on, there is a local version of JPRO where you can become the convener and gatherer. And when we talk about the pipeline of talent, it's exposure to professionals that don't work for us. That is a critically important part of creating those kinds of connections. It's serious, it costs next to nothing, and we should be the biggest game in town. We have committed ourselves to trying to work with Alana and the JPRO team to bring in as many as 100 JCCs into the JPRO network in the coming year on a first-come, first-served basis, but we'd be very excited to see this list be far longer and with a far smaller font the next time you see this graphic. I want to say a couple of words about our overnight camping field. We have had an enormous amount of discussion, deliberation, and attention to how we can better serve the overnight camping field, perhaps the single most powerful medium for creating and evolving Jewish identity on the part of young people and teenagers, and by the way, the incredible staff that bring those programs to life. As part of moving beyond portfolio consulting, we discontinued portfolio consulting in the role that we used to have at JCC Association in expectation that we would raise our game with the concierge model of the experience building block and with a far more intentional engagement between the rest of JCC Association and our camps. The first order of business was resolving a nomenclature problem that I was suffering from my first day here, when we talked about 160 JCCs and, depending on the day, 10 to 15 independent overnight camps, residential agencies that are owned on a separate and independent basis, participating agency members of JCC Association that are not JCCs. It's enough to choke on the concept and to make those that are defined by that category feel like they are anything other than the same as everybody else in the room. The same not in who they are and what they do, the same in being a fundamental partner and stakeholder in the work of the field. And we felt referring to them here forward as Jewish community camps allows us to use the abridgment when we need it, and when we need to make the distinction, we'll talk about Jewish community centers and Jewish community camps. But we are all equal, similar partners, participants, and stakeholders in the work that we are doing. We are using our megaphone with partners with whom we have not worked nearly as closely in the past, like the Foundation for Jewish Camp, Jeremy Fingerman, whose handsome picture you saw just a couple of minutes ago. We were very proud to get the news that in the last few months, the Yashar grants, which are about capital development for inclusion and accessibility, funded by the Weinberg Foundation out of Baltimore, announced 15 grants, 9 of which, totaling more than $1.3 million, went to JCCs, Jewish community centers, or Jewish community camps. And most recently, the Yedid Nefesh grants in support of creating mental health professional capacity at growing numbers of camps, and funded by the Marcus Foundation out of Atlanta by way of FJC. 12 JCC camps were the beneficiaries. And again, we are beating the drum all the time in these places about the gravitas, breadth, and scope of our field. We also have undertaken a 6-month research project. A group of you that are going to be coming to a breakfast meeting tomorrow morning with Sue Gelsey and I received the draft research results, examining exactly what are the resources out there that we can better tap into in support of the work of our field. We have visited with major partners at JCamp 180, whose new CEO, Sarah Eisinger, seems to be a formidable potential ally. Tom Rosenberg, the CEO of the American Camping Association, by the way, the first from the Jewish community to be the CEO of ACA. By the way, a former Jewish community camp director, Young Judea, shameless plug. And we continue to look for things that they are going to be able to uniquely do for us. In the meanwhile, we have already let it be known that this research effort has resulted in our working on 3 major initiatives for our overnight camps that we would not have been able to conceive of doing before we began this reimagination of our work. One is benchmarking, now in its 15th year for Jewish community centers. We'll see the first ever pilot for Jewish community camps in 2020, when somewhere between 8 and 10 Jewish overnight camps in our system will undertake a comprehensive overnight camping benchmarking program that, if proving effective, will become a standard membership benefit for everybody in the field, whether within a JCC, Jewish Community Center, or at a Jewish community camp, and marketable to 200 or more Jewish camps outside the JCC world, marketable in a way that can create a stream of revenue for us that will help us to reinvest in the apparatus that will come up behind us. That's number one. The Secure Communities Network is going to work to us on security consultation with every overnight camp in our system to begin to do the daunting but vitally important task of determining how we can increasingly safeguard ourselves in this difficult time that we are in. And Sue Gelsey, together with Brian Siegel from the JCC of Detroit and Jonah Geller, the CEO of Capital Camps, have begun a discussion about what could perhaps be the most important aspect of this work. If you're an overnight camp that recruits from JCC communities, you should have much more than a benign relationship with the JCCs in those places where you recruit. We believe fundamentally that it is in the selfish financial benefit of both the Jewish community centers and the overnight camps, financial selfish benefit, to work thoughtfully together about moving traffic in both directions. And I won't get into it in great length here, but being a Jewish community camp not connected officially to a JCC should come with more benefits than conferences and trainings and the other funding programs. It should come from the extraordinary access you get by being part of the family of JCCs. your obligation to them to bring your families through the JCC doors for the things that the centers do, and the center's responsibility to drive families into the JCC camp world in their own selfish interest. Because those kids are the future community leaders if we're doing a good job on identity building. And more to the point, the 20,000 or so people that staff those camps are the future people in this room. You're wondering about the pipeline. The greatest captive audience of young people working in purposeful, intensive, immersive, repeating community environments are the people that work in our camps, overnight and day. We need to staff the staff if we have a real hope of populating the pipeline. You'll hear more about that from Brian. Oh, man. Sorry. I can't let this segment go to the Q&A for the one question that there'll be time for without talking a little bit about the context of our work today, because nobody is oblivious to the fact that we're not doing our business in the same time and the same circumstances that we've been doing it for the last 5 or 10 or 25 years. We are living through a very unsettling spike in anti-Semitism, and not just, as if that would not be bad enough, intimidation on the university campus or graffiti on the walls of our buildings or political incorrectness overcoming our ability to talk about things that are central to who we are. We're talking about violent, murderous anti-Semitism. The statistics are alarming, and it's not just lone wolf, white supremacist outliers, and it's not just in communities out in the hinterland. It's New York City and Jersey City, New Jersey. It is in the most populous places in the country from sources nobody would have given any credence to the possibility that it could come from, because that's the nature of anti-Semitism. It's insidious. It is virulent. It doesn't belong to any corner of the political spectrum. It comes out from every corner of the political spectrum when it is allowed out. And we are not getting forewarnings. We're getting smacked in the head with the reality of it. And we have to continue to conduct ourselves as leaders in the context of what's going on today. And what I'm seeing and what I have seen in the field in Pittsburgh and in Poway and in New York and in Rockland and in other places are JCCs and JCC populations responding and standing up to be counted and standing side by side with civic and political and communal leaders in ways that can make us proud. 1,000 people came to the No Hate, No Fear rally in New York that crossed the Brooklyn Bridge after the horrific attack in Muncie, and people from JCCs in this room came from as far away as Cleveland and Boston and Washington, D.C. to join delegations from New York. 23 JCCs turned out with more than 1,000 people on that day. It's a very strong demonstration of who we are. But I think it's very important to say a couple of things about what we can expect to happen in the Jewish community, what we have within our power to do, and what we don't have within our power to do. The first reflex of the organized Jewish community and the funders is going to be lots of new initiatives and money that's already starting to flow from the crafts in Boston and from elsewhere into new initiatives to contest and contend with anti-Semitism, to promote community engagement and cultural outreach to our religious and ethnic peers in the community, all in expectation that if we do these things well, we can stem the tide. So there are two things that are important to observe about that. Number one, if it was within the power of the Jewish community to eliminate anti-Semitism, we wouldn't have had to wait this long to do it. We have no such power to drive it out. And we would be able to say that community outreach and engagement with our peers in the religious and ethnic community is something with which one major player in the Jewish community does, and does with great distinction already. That's you and our colleagues around the field. The one thing that we know is within our power and that is vitally important in resisting the tide of anti-Semitism is to stand more strongly together in the face of it. Stronger, more cohesive, more committed Jewish communities joining hands in spite of the things that we don't always agree about is the way in which we ready ourselves for whatever comes. It's the way in which we deploy our most vocal, most powerful, and most influential leaders to bang on the desks of university presidents and mayors and governors and civic and religious leaders, commanding their attention. The weaker we are, the more divided we are, the more vulnerable we are. The single best resource the Jewish community has at its disposal for contending with anti-Semitism is the work that we do. And so we need to do it more and better, not by inventing a magic formula that, but for the fact that we never invented it before, we wouldn't be in this fix. This is the reality. It's the world we live in. Society in this country is a lot stronger than people may want to give it credit for. We're going to have to lean into it. But the best contribution we can make is by being a better version of ourselves and remembering that we control that, and by dint of that control, we can accomplish a great deal. The role of the town square, the role of the center movement, the role of this gigantic platform of ours, looking for opportunities to stand up and be heard in the face of anti-Semitism. I wrote several months ago, after a remarkable experience at the JCC Rockland, about the unfinished work of righting an historic anti-Semitic wrong on the part of the International Olympic Committee for having never acknowledged the memories of the Munich 11 with a moment of silence at the opening ceremonies of the Olympic Games. This summer's Tokyo Games will mark 48 years since the murderous massacre of our athletes and coaches and the increasingly elderly family members that survive our lonely, quiet voices in the effort. A new film, There Was No Silence, is in the final stages of complete editing. You will have it from us in the next handful of days. It's a 35-minute film that chronicles the story, the heroic effort of Anki Spitzer and Ilana Romano and almost nobody else, and the uniquely powerful part that was played by JCC Rockland and David Kirstel and his leadership in creating a hue and cry that touched 157 countries ahead of the Olympic Games in London, Ontario, and created an incredible amount of noise that has bothered the International Olympic Committee ever since, to the point that we begin to be hopeful that maybe they're going to change their tune in Tokyo. But if not, we're not going to let the Spitzer and Romano family deal with that issue all by themselves. Since the birth of JCC Maccabi in 1982, commemoration and honoring the memories of the Munich 11 has been a fundamental part of every single Games. Beginning in 1994, it became a required element of the host community's responsibilities for building and mounting a meaningful engagement that would raise consciousness on the parts of everybody that turned out at the opening ceremonies. We talk about numbers in our platform all the time. In the last 25 years, the Games have been held 86 times in 57 cities. And the Munich 11 have been honored and remembered in the presence of more than 688,000 members of the Jewish and JCC Maccabi communities. Nobody in the world outside of Israel has done more to tell this story by dint of our commitment, by dint of our connection through through athletics and athletic competition, and our geometric leverage to create audience. We will come together with the families of the Munich 11 in the embrace of the JCC Maccabi system on the biggest platform of the world to say that those families are our families. And the effort will continue until the International Olympic Committee acknowledges what they have failed to acknowledge this far. If it were anybody other than Israel and Jews, they would have held their moment of silence the very next opportunity that they had. So we look forward to welcoming Anki Spitzer and other members of the Munich 11 families in Milwaukee at J-Summit in May. We look forward to rolling out There Was No Silence, this extraordinary documentary film. We look forward to following the lead and the example of the JCC Rockland, which by its bootstraps shined a light on what we are capable of doing. Not the biggest community in the country, not the biggest JCC in the system, but the one that had the biggest heart at the biggest moment. And David, where is David? Kirstel? Thank you for your leadership. Okay, so in my notes it says Q&A. I think we have three minutes. We'd have no minutes. 3 minutes, forgive me. But I would welcome any questions that I might be able to see. That's probably me. That's me. If the thing works. If I warn you out with my expansive comments that there are no questions, that's also fine. Anybody? No? Okay. So let me finish by this. First of all, you see, my plan worked. Not a single tough question from this room. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm heading home right after this session. It's been fantastic to be with you. So let me say a couple of things by way of finishing. And I'm determined that the bulk of the next 48 hours or more that I will be here is our time, it's your time. For me, for the entire JCC Association professional team, for Gary Jacobs, our extraordinary chair, we are here to talk to you about anything you want to talk about, to share, to learn about whatever you need, whatever you want that we have within our capability to provide, we're eager to provide it. And so this Q&A, while nominally not now, is an open invitation. So let me say the following things. I think that JCC Association, in its renewed design, is ready to hit its stride. I think that this is going to be a year of announcements and strategic advances. I think you can be proud of the team of people that have taken it upon themselves to come to work at 528th Avenue or in our Jerusalem office or in St. Paul or wherever we happen to be. They are a remarkable cadre of professionals. The disproportionate majority came from where you are, from your institutions, and the handful of us that came from outside, I hope, bring objective and complementary talent and skill. But I believe that we are ready now. We're assembled, largely. Now it's a matter of implementing the work that we have been preparing so long and so hard to undertake. I was deeply disappointed that I was not able to be in the room with you last year, but I cannot tell you how moved and energized I was by what I got to see when I watched videos of the sessions that I had missed. And there are two particular things that I want to remind everybody that you heard if you were here last year. Mark Sokol, in his magnificent emceeing of the Innovation Incubator, posed the question to the panelists about what was the single most exciting thing that they saw in foundation philanthropy. And Harleen Winnick-Appelman, on reflection, said this. She said, we're witnessing JCC executives competing with one another so that somebody else can get money from a foundation. And that doesn't exist anywhere else in the foundation-engaged, organized Jewish world. And Sandy Carden, who created with Charlie and Lynn Schusterman one of the great Jewish foundations in this last century, I believe, said that if there is a renaissance to be had in the Jewish world, the priesthood of that renaissance are the people in this room, that you are the Kohanim. You will guide and lead this Jewish community from where we are to where we believe we can be. I don't think that there can be a greater validation from somebody who had told me not 2 years before that he and the Schustermans had no interest in JCCs, of what happens when you get a crash course in exposure and contact with the leaders and the caliber of leaders that we have here. We are serving in leadership roles in a complicated time. We are serving in our leadership roles in communities that are dealing with their own complexities and their own dynamics, and there's no broad brush analysis or assessment that we can say from on far, this is your situation and this is how you should handle it. We are living at a time when the luxury, if you will, of being a JCC or a JCC executive that is a complementary part to robust and dynamic institutional Jewish life has largely passed us by. We are not complementary. We're the main event in the Jewish community. And that means that the leaders in this room need both to conduct themselves as leaders of their communities and to take stock of the breadth and extent of the responsibility of what that means. It's not that we wait to hear from the leaders and do the best that we can. It's that we look for the opportunities to help be transformational in our communities by openings for us to step in and to be heard and to be seen. For sure, being the beneficiary of mega foundation investment will get us noticed, as it's happened in your communities when your own big donors have made contributions to the J. But we have a bigger job to do than the one that we've been doing up until now, because what happens after this moment is going to depend on entirely what we do with it. So a teacher of mine once described Jewish history as a 4,000-year-long chain. And in every moment, in every window, there's a link in the chain. This is our link. We've inherited where we are on this link from the 4,000-year links that came before us. And the next 4,000 years depend on what we do with this link. It's not less important than that. That's what chains are. We are as strong as the weakest link. The decisions that we make today are not just about the problems and challenges of the moment. They are about the opportunities and the potential of leading so that a generation from now, a century from now, the reality of Jewish life on this continent will have reaped the benefit of what we did as stewards of our link. And about that, we should be a little bit uneasy and incredibly proud to be the ones to have that responsibility, more so than any collection of professionals in North America today. For me, there isn't a more important, more responsible, more significant place to be than with you in this moment, working together to make this link the best that we can make it. Thank you very much for your leadership.